Hey everybody, welcome back to the Hand Toolery. I'm Andrew Malacy. Because I've got some furniture builds coming up this summer, I'm going to be making two desks, one more complicated than the other. It's got more drawers and it's going to have like a drawer side of drawers and it's going to have turned legs. So because I'm going to be doing those, I'm actually going to be making a pole lathe to be able to turn the legs on the lower portion of the leg. All right, so here you are real close. Let me show you what we're gonna do. So I've got here my little planning guide. I never rip anything off. It's just a half sheet of paper, but when I'm done with something, I rip it off. And it's got a little pencil here. And I basically leave it like this during the whole project. And I've also got the Woodwright's guide. It's the one that has more like, it's got less introduction to working and more sort of like advanced stuff. And if you go all the way to the end, it has some great drawings, some etchings and things like that. So this is a good one to get, and it's got your pole lathe as well as the treadle lathe. So I'd like to make the treadle lathe because it's constant motion, whereas this one is reciprocal action. But this one is much simpler to make. But I think the long-term benefits of this treadle lathe, if you can make it, are going to be better. Even so, he's designed it, he says right here, he's made it out of basically construction lumber. And so I went ahead and picked up a whole bunch of 2x4s from my brother, who had a stack of them that he didn't need. And so I got like 10 2x4s. I got some of them, mostly I was concerned that they were basically straight, and all of them were, so that's good. And that I was able to just salvage most of it. So I didn't take the cream of the crop from him. I took some that were nice and some that weren't as desirable. The basic design is that, you know, like this is like basically a 2x8 right here. The sides are, but if you laminate, of course, two 2x4s together, you'll get a little bit less than a 2x8, obviously. So these are meant to be 7 inches wide. And then you've got the rail beds, and everything is, you know, just quite simple. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to laminate up some 2x4s. I didn't want to make an extra trip to the store since this was free, so it'll be one extra step of, you know, tidying up the lumber and gluing it together. It won't be exactly the same. Not worried about it. But that's the plans. I've laid out more or less what I'm going to have to do for the major glue ups. And so I'm going to have to glue a couple at 44. I have to glue a couple at 66, and then I need a couple more cut at XYZ. And then it gives me the total how many 2x4s I need. So, all right, I hope you enjoy. Okay, so if I started with 10, I've got 4 left, and I think I've got all the main pieces. I'm going to glue up 2 and 2, and then make a single, one of the poppets, the adjustable, the movable poppet. I'm going to make that with 4 boards at 20 inches. Then I had to cut 5 or 2.5 2x4s in half, but I had to cut 5 at 4 feet. I adjusted that measurement a little bit. Then here's some other ones for the feet. Here's the long ones that we glued up side by side. And then I just got some stuff left over. got all the pieces basically cleaned up for the most part, or glued up. These are going to be the leg feet. These will be the feet. These will be the this will be the poppet, the movable, adjustable one. That'll be an end. That'll be an end. And this is my lathe bed, and that is the support under the lathe bed. It's the support rail that eventually you'll attach the spring pole to. And these two rail beds for the lathe, these are the ones that had the least amount of twist. I barely had to really tweak them at all. They're nice and straight for the most part, and they really won't require any muscle to put into place. So I'm hoping that means they're stable and good. This one has like a 1/4 inch of twist over the whole thing, and I'll put it as the lathe, like the support rail underneath, because it'll just twist in. I'm sure it'll be fine. And yeah, now I'm going to start cutting joinery. Now, despite these three being different pieces, they're all going to have the same joinery. You're going to cut a tenon on both ends of all of them at exactly the same length. Since this is the rail bed and this is the support underneath, they have to be exactly the same length from end to end. And so they don't have to be the same total length, although you'd want it to be. It just has to be from shoulder of the tenon to shoulder of the tenon. So we can lay them out and do them all at once. I looked at each side and I determined I'm just going to go ahead and cut on this side 4 inches in. So I'll transfer my line and I'll do all this side, and then I'll have to measure from the tenon here in the 40 inches. So I don't want to assume that everything's perfect. But if you've got them perfect, great, but I don't. They're just about a 1/16 off. So I'll go from here to here rather than in 4 inches. And we're gonna have to transfer the tenon around. Always remember to carry your layout lines off your reference face. These are going to get left full thickness, and we're going to take it down and make a 1 inch tenon. So whatever that is, we got to make a 1 inch tenon. Okay. We want to make a 1 inch tenon because we want to leave a lot of meat to put a wedge through to wedge it in. And also because we have a 1 inch chisel. We don't want to make an arbitrary distance in and then have to like fiddle with it. We can just use the mallet with this to make the mortise, right? Because each one's different, I'm just going to take a gauge, find center, and then I'll use a 1/2 inch chisel on either side, and that'll give me my 1 inch. But then I'll make sure. All right, so that was lucky. So, I'll put this here, make just a mark. Okay, now what I can do is, I've got my 1 inch tenon in the middle, and I'll just set the gauge on the edge of it. Here, let me show you. So right here is the width of my chisel. I'll set the point of the gauge at the very extremity right there. And I'll show you the line. Can you see the line right there? So there's the width of the chisel and there's a line. That's the gauge. And then if everything's correct, when I come over here, it should sink right in that line as well. Which it does. Here, let me show you. There we go, we have a 1 inch wide tenon, and there's where we're going to gauge off of. Transfer the gauge lines all the way around, and then move on to the next one and do the same thing. And I'm just gonna relieve. There's a knot there. That's that. If you got a tenant saw, now's the time to use it. I'm going to start on the back here. Saw doesn't reach that deep. There it is. Left a little bit on there, as you can tell, but that's a nice clean tenon. And it's slightly wider than our chisel. Great, I can shave it off and tweak it. And you know, if you just take your time, look at this. These are very accurate. I'm pretty proud of those. They're thin. Nice. Okay, they're all clamped together, they're lined up. I mean, that's really nice. Now I'm going to measure my 40 off one of these here. So I've got my lines now, that's my 40 inches. Same thing here, transfer all the lines around. And yeah, keep going. Again, use your reference lines. All right, So all three are marked. It's the same process, and then they're done. So I've got all the major components here. We've got basically the feet. We've got the movable poppet. We've got the lower stretcher, the lower rail. We've got the short end, which will hold I guess one of the centers. Got the long end, which will hold the rail that goes up and down for the spring pole. Then here are the two lathe bed rails. So they're going to get mortised into this and this. So the idea being that we're going to take, for example, this one right here, this long one. It's going to get mortised basically all the way down to the floor. Okay? And then from about just over 30 inches up from the floor is going to be the rail here. Now, if I look down this, it's not perfect. I'm really not worried about it. It's fairly straight like this, not bowed or anything. It's got a little bit of a twist, I would say, a tiny little bit, but I'm okay with that. These ones are straight, that's what matters. All right, so I'm going to set these aside. And I'll start by laying out the mortises. They're going to get the exact same mortises in the exact same places. And so in reality, maybe you could just put them one on top of the other, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to just create them separately. And then it'll accept these rails here, and then one down here. Okay, I'm going to create a line. And that's even with this one right here, which is good. And then I'm going to measure up 30 inches from the bottom here. Then what I'll do is I'll just transfer the line across. Okay, so I'll just measure up the same thing here, 30 inches. And strike the line across. Like I said, I drew a line across here, so I'm going to match up that line at the bottom of this one. This line should be pretty close. Yeah, we're good. All right, so those work. Next is laying out the thickness of each mortise. Okay, so we're going to mark in 1 inch on each side, on all the sides, and that's where we're going to lay out our tenons. Okay. Okay, and now we're going to have to label all our parts. So I've got 1 inch measured in on each side. This is going to be the where the pieces go like this. So I'm going to lay them out. I'm going to mark everything where it's going to go, and we're only going to really mark the height. Then I'm going to use my 1-inch chisel to make the mortise. I'm going to mark it not on the shoulder here. I'm going to mark it on the so 1. I'm going to make this 1. Then you have to think that it's going to go like this. So we're going to make this 2, 2. Got all my pieces marked out. This is my 1, 2, 3, 4. So now I'm going to go ahead and just cut mortise 1. So, all right. So I'm going to find 10 and 1, line it up with where we're going to make mortise 1. And you're just going to present it to the workpiece. With this big tenon like it is, you can just hold it down with hand pressure. I'm going to go a little bit, so it's right on my line. In fact, maybe the tiny hairs past it. That's it. Just going to mark that. And this is probably more than enough. Okay. Here's the thing, we're not going to measure directly off this. We're going to measure using my chisel. So we're going to put it right on the line here. All right, I'm going to grab this. If anything, we want to make this small. So I'm going to put it on just on the edge of it. And just double check. Nice, exactly the size of the chisel. Like I said, even a tiny bit small. All right, that's it. I'm gonna fill this in. And we can do the same on the other side right now if we'd like, but I'd rather just make progress on this to show. So we've got our mortise laid out. It should be pretty close, right? The way you can tell is, so if this is up, so this is the bottom, should be close. Our tenon is just a little big, which is great. Now if we flip it, this is the top. Tenon is, ooh, it's just close. Perfect, perfect. So we're gonna leave it just like that. Okay? And instead of chopping this mortise out, I use a brace and bits. So I've got myself a bit here. It's not 1 inch. I think it's 3/4 or something. But I prefer to make sure I don't go over my lines. Really, it's not that important to be too accurate with a little margin of error here. But if you want, you can just sort of, check yourself like that. And once you feel the spur come through, stop it. You know the drill, no pun intended, but just come back through the other way. Because we've undersized our bit, again, accuracy is not my greatest concern. Now, if you're wondering why, I mean, it seems pretty logical, but if you're wondering why I went and took out the middle first, because you need a place for these chips to go. Also, I like to have a small chisel on hand, because that works to pry stuff out. I'm not particularly worried about breaking the grain too much. I just want to make sure I got a good clean mortise right here. Also, my mortise should be fair, as square as I can possibly make it at this point. All right, so there's that. We just come back the other way. It's pretty straightforward. Okay, here we are, number one. Let's see how it goes in number one. I mean, I made it small, so I'd be surprised if it goes straight in. It's gonna be difficult, I know it. Just as it is, the board looks nice and square to it. Pretty close. This is very sturdy. Okay, cool. One down, two more to go on this board, and then three on the other one. So here we go. Okay, so after cutting all the mortises and fiddling with all the tenons and dressing them up nice, chamfering the ends a little bit and smoothing them out, it all fits. It's a pretty tight fit. It's not exactly easy to take apart or put together, but you can do it. And I tried to force one, and you can see all this glue here, is because I forced this one and it cracked it along the long grain here. I wasn't thinking. I was just being impatient, which I tend to be. But from there on out, I just decided to make sure I got a good fit. Everything seems to be pretty good. There's a little gap here because it's just hard to pull it together tight without the wedges. Here's the moving headstock or the poppet. And this is rock solid. And as you might know, but it's gonna have like a little tenon here on the end that goes in between this, and then you're gonna wedge underneath it. There will be a spring here, but I'm not sure I'm gonna actually go that route with the moving arm and everything up there. I'm gonna maybe try and attach something to my rafter and see if I can just do that, because that'll get me up and running quickly as well. The next order of business is to go ahead and create the feet and the mortises for that, the tenons, everything. And then I'm going to shape the adjustable head or the poppet for it. And then everything will basically get shaped and then finished. And then we're gonna, after everything gets finished, we plane everything smooth and looking good, then I will fit the wedges. So we're gonna leave the wedges until everything's more or less at its final thickness. The way that they have it on the plans online is that they're gonna create a little decorative, relief here. I'm not gonna do that. If you're following the dimensions in the book I showed you, it's gonna be only a 2.5 inch deep tenon because you're gonna relieve this about an inch. But if you look at the SketchUp plans that they've released in the Popular Woodworking article, it's a 3.5 inch tenon because it's gonna go the full thickness of this. And they remember that piece is 4 inches, so it only has a 1/2 inch relief here, more or less. And so basically, since this is the way it is, I'm not going to actually cut this out and make it look fancy or anything at the moment. I'm going to make the tenon the full distance here. The mortise will go all the way through. And basically what I'm going to do then is find center on this and line it up with the center line here of my two boards, which it doesn't have to be exactly the center, which it's probably not exactly. But then we'll go off of that. I'm just going to, and then I'll transfer that all the way around. Okay. Then what I'll do is I'll set this on where I'm going to mark it. So I'll mark this as, call this A. So we're going to make this, just get the center line there. It goes basically like that. Set this on the center line and on the base line. I'm going to mark the height. Okay. I like to lay out my tenons first, so I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to bring it back to this piece here to fit the mortises. Got our little trench for the saw. Now we're going to lay out the actual tenon itself. It'll be full width, but it'll have a 2-inch space in the middle here. So what we can do for that is essentially, and it doesn't have to be perfect, it's just got to be easy to replicate. So what we can do is just mark, you know, an inch here, and then mark an inch on the other side. Like I said, it doesn't have to be perfect. Then what I'll do is I'll take my gauge and we can just, there we go. It's not perfect, but it really doesn't matter. We're going to leave this in the mortise. This will be cut out here. We're also going to end up leaving a 1/2 inch, so you can do the same trick. I'm just going to put this in there and mark a 1/2 inch down. Take your square and mark across. So we're going to leave this shoulder and leave all of this. Now the other thing we have to do is we're going to leave a 1/2 inch of thickness. It's really not so important what you leave. You don't want it to be too thick because then it'll compromise the mortise, the walls of the mortise. So it's going to be about 1/3, a 1/2 inch is about 1/3 of the thickness here and 1/3 here. So we're not compromising anything really at all. The plans call for like 5/8, but I don't have a 5/8 chisel and I don't want to mess with it. So what we can do then is the same thing we've done before. We're going to find center. That looks about right. Almost right. And then what I'm going to do is basically get close with my chisel. I made a line. All right, here it is. And if we go from both sides, hopefully our chisel will fit between there, which it does. So there's our line. So again, what I did is I came close to center and then I guesstimated the middle like that. So I found the center with my 2 points. I laid my chisel more or less over top of that, dividing it halfway. then I brought my gauge to the edge of the chisel line right there. So there's a chisel mark right there. And that leaves us a 1/2 inch. And it's actually good if you leave it a little thicker than a 1/2 inch, so that way you can remove material. So that's what we'll do is, I will transfer the line all the way around. There it is. I haven't removed any material off the board yet, so I wanted to keep it as close to the original as possible. And again, yeah, that's good. Perfect. In reality, we could probably just keep this setting there. So I'm gonna do that actually. We're using dimensional lumber, so what's the advantage of using dimensional lumber if it's not quicker? Let me see. Will it get us a 1/2 inch? That was messed up. It's a little bit different. So I'm gonna replicate this process on itself on this board because it's not quite the same. All right, so we're just sawing down to our line. Pretty painless, I would say. Great. For this, I'm just going to use my large saw. I can get pretty close with it. I've got plenty to work with. Pretty good and nice and straight, good and consistent. That's what we want. You can see I'm right on my line, which is great. It's gonna be less to take away later. Good smooth cut. Half the tenon is sawn, other half to go. As we've already done before, we've got to lay out what part of the tenon we're gonna keep. Lay this down there, bam. I'm going to reference off the same side. Okay. Same thing here. Now I've got to mark 1 inch on each side. It's getting hard to see the middle line there, but if I do that, I can tell that's where it is. See how close we are to 2 inches. It really doesn't matter. We're just above it, just over 2 inches. We'll keep it. You can see the advantage of using hand tools primarily because you don't have to have anything square, like other than like your reference faces. Like I don't even need an end square. Perfect. Now we can lay our pieces one over the other. I'm going to mark the center on this, like I should have done, but it's easy because it's just the glue line. So what I'm going to do is just basically mark everything out. I'm happy with that for sure. Look at that. This will all be planed off, but just to keep everything straight, I've got my A here and my A there, so I know these faces go this way. Everything's going to get transferred around. If you have any discrepancies like this line, go with the inside line. You can always pare it away. I'm going to bring all these lines up. Now the one thing to remember about all these pencil lines is that they're on the outside. So you want to stay inside of these. Same thing here, same shtick. We're going to find center. There it is. That's the good width right there. I'm going to draw end to end. Then we're going to do the same thing on the bottom. Transfer these things around. But I'm pulling directly off the top now, not off the actual lines I drew on the face. And if everything's good, which it is, it should be the same. All right. So we've got a 1/2 inch mortise to make all the way through right here and here. And it's only going down a 1/2 inch right here and here. Okay, let's start mortising. I've got a 3/8 inch bit, and it's going to go through here and here. Okay, it's not terribly important that they're straight up and down. It's much more important that they're perfectly this way. So if you want, you can maybe attach a square. You can clamp a square onto here. I think I'll do that actually. So as a little visual cue there, I've got a square clamped up and staying well within. And I'm going to just make sure I'm going this way. And I'm just keeping my eye on the bit and on the square. Trying to stay straight. You can kind of direct it as you go, but I'm using a smaller bit simply because that gives me more leeway. Okay. I don't think I need to worry so much about it being plumb, but having this guide was really helpful. I'm drilling up, boring the hole upward. I'm really not worried about the wall here. I just don't want to get too far that way. Not gonna lie, that was tedious. Got them all bored. Some 20 holes or so. I think I'm gonna go ahead and just do it right here. I'm starting just inside my lines. I've got everything mortised out. I've got this, I went ahead and roughed it out like this. This is set to just slightly more than 1/2 inch, and I use my chisel for that. And you can just finish it off like that. There's my reference, and there's my mortises, 2 full mortises, and then this one here just as a register on the tenon. Okay, so we've got one bottom tenon. It protrudes a little tiny bit because this was longer to begin with, but I'm excited about that. Okay, we've arrived at a really big milestone, which is we're going to make the adjustable headstock or tailstock here. It can be either, really. Anyways, so what you're going to do is you have to find the distance between here, and depending on the way you've done it, it might be really simple. I've really not concerned myself too much with precise measurements, but I confirmed that the difference between this space here and the space between those rails over there is minimal. It's like a 1/16 maybe, so it's pretty accurate. And this is about a 1/16 wider, so this is a little narrower. In any case, I took the difference. I took the width between these and I transferred it onto here. I found center and then I measured off of center and then gauged the line. I've come up 6.5 inches. The plans and SketchUp from Roy Underhill come up almost 7. It's 6 7/8. I've come up 6.5 because my rails aren't quite 4 inches like his. So I decided to only make it 6.5 because I wanted a little more room up top. Okay, so the idea is that when you cut it, it slides down between the rails there, and it's just like that. Took some fidgeting, but I got it all cleaned up. Kind of stops, which means it swells this ever so slightly here. I've been working on that, but I'm going to leave it. See, kind of, and it gets right to there. In the middle is perfect. When I get to the ends, of course, they can't bow out. So it does get a little harder, but I don't think I'll ever get this close one end to the other. You can see, it's not easy. Same for down here. I don't think I'll ever pass here, but it still fits, right? So, right now then I'm gonna bevel all the corners and whatnot, but that is looking great. I've got the wedge. I've marked top as the top side, which is gonna be the flat that rides under here. What I'm gonna do is measure from the front, the smallest opening, and then I'll have a lot to pound through, to move through. So what I'll do is I'll just line up here. You know what, I'll make a mark right there. There's more or less where the rail is, the top line of the rail is. So I'm going to transfer that flat line all the way around. All right, lines up perfect. Okay, this is the height of the rail bed here. Let's see how close we are. Great, right on, spot on. Okay, so next I'll transfer the angle of this around. Now one thing is I'm going to start my, I'm not going to start directly on this line. I'm going to start a hair above it, just so that way it purchases against the rail itself, not against the block on the inside. So the mortise is going to start slightly above. All right, I've gone ahead and cut the mortise, and I've been tweaking it. It's doing well right now, and I'm sure it'll get better over time. But I've just chamfered. I've given everything a chamfer. It's a nice angle. It goes in real nice, and it keeps going home. But the idea is you put it in, and then already now it's kind of solid. But once you drive it home, like. There it is. Comes through the other side. And this is nuts. I mean, I can't believe how well that wedge holds. There's plenty of room on this side. So once I think this works the hole in a little bit more, yeah, I'm not gonna mess with it much more. Actually, I'm not gonna mess with it anymore because I'm pleased with the fit. I can't even believe how well this works. This was what actually scared me the most, was making this wedge. I've messed up wedges before, and it's a pain to fix. So, and one thing, like I said, is I made the mortise a little higher than the actual level, and I can feel that my finger just barely catches. It's maybe, I don't know, it's maybe a 1/16, maybe less. I just moved it ever so slightly up, and this goes straight through. This goes straight through, and it doesn't catch because I beveled it. I've chamfered it. And it's bearing against the thing, not against the block itself. So it's pressing up against the rail. Awesome. What I did for the wedges, because I'm gonna have to make 6 of them at 3/8 inch wide each, I picked a good straight piece, and I'm not going to worry about this. It's just about the right thickness. It needs to be 1 inch. It's about 7/8. And I drew out the profile of the wedge, and then drew it on the other side, and essentially just resawed it. So what I'll do is, this is ready to go. So I'll saw 3/8 inch, clean up the edge, 3/8 inch, clean up the edge. Do that 6 times. Got 5 wedges. I had a 6th one over there. I chipped it at the end. It's gluing up, but yeah, went well. Can't beat that system. Now we got to cut 6 mortises, and then the lathe is basically ready to go structurally. The process for fitting the wedges is just like this wedge here, and I've already got them all numbered. This is like joint 3, so I'll name this wedge 3, and so there we go. All right, I don't know if you can see that, but I did mark an inch. Yeah, I marked it on the top, that's why, so you can see it right there. All right, and we're just gonna trace this out, making sure my joint is together, which it is. Okay, and I'm gonna trace this right here. And trace the whole thing. Okay, we'll take that out and we're gonna transfer our lines across. I can also do it like this, which I don't prefer to do, but I will. Should give us something close. All right, so that's the profile of our wedge right there. And same thing as before, we're gonna actually push our line back a 1/16 or so and start the mortise back. Okay, now this is a 3" wedge because that is just under 1/3, just over 1/3 of the thickness. I'm gonna go ahead and mark this one for sure. This is my number 3. And I'm gonna put 3 chisel marks in it too. Okay, the first one. Not bad. It's a little tight, of course. No big deal. It's got to be cleaned out a little bit more. So I got the first set of wedges mortised in. Okay. All right, here we are, number 2. We got to make sure we put it in the correct way. Oh, I'm excited for this. Wow. Oh my goodness. That's amazing. That is so awesome. That's not really even a gap. That's just like where the fibers are compressed. The other side is so tight. It's nuts. It's amazing. All right, let's do this side here. It's amazing. If it was sturdy before, this thing is rock solid now. Great. I've got the 2 center points in. They're both this screw that I took out of that I've had since I dismantled parts of the shop that have been around for a while. And what I did with this is I drilled this first very carefully. I sunk the screw in, cut off the bolt, and then just filed it quite awkwardly, but made sure that it was a good point in the center. Then if you've watched these videos before, you know all you do then is you bring your tailstock up, or the poppet, and then you're gonna touch it to, here, let me back this out. You're gonna touch it to the headstock here, carefully, because a factor that you want to make sure is that you're not pushing it forward or contorting it one way or the other. So what I did is I set a square across it like this. I brought it up very carefully, and then I made sure that the gap across the square was equal, and then I just tried to push it from the base in. Then I removed the square, and slowly I went ahead and I tightened down the wedge, just finger tight, and then just tapped it, and then just made sure it looked all good and left a little impression, backed it out. So it's basically an exercise in seeing how accurate you can be. And before I did that though, another thing is, before I actually transferred this, I took my square up to it and made sure that the gap, that it was perfectly aligned every which way I could. Then I brought it up, of course, and made my impression on the tailstock, on the headstock. The tips are touching. It's about as perfect as I can get it. I don't think I could have done any better, really. So, okay, now I've got to make the tool rest, and we want it to be on center with the, we want it to be at the same height as the center, more or less, or somewhere close. So I'm just going to line it up right there at the bottom of the point, and I'm going to mark where it crosses. There. So our center is going to be here. And what I'm going to do is move this on either end and transfer that line to both of these. This line represents where the tool rest top will be, okay? So what I'll do then is I'll take a 2x4 and attach it to here and then this will ride free. I pre-drilled this hole. I've got it lined up exactly where I want it. Now that I've got this drilled, I've got my peg. I sized it, it's a little tight. And great, it'll hold it in place. Now I'm going to mark exactly where I want to put this other one. Now look how much easier this is going to be. I'll insert the peg to go right there. And I'll just clamp one side now, exactly where I want it. I set a level on the lathe bed, and I look about where the level is. And the bubble is just a tiny little bit past the line there. And it's just on the line there, so if I want, I can just tap it. And that's about the same. Okay? All my lines look good. Here we go. Boring the last hole. This. The plans call for a dowel, a long dowel, to be put underneath the lathe bed, and well, actually two of them. And I've thought about doing that, but I'm not going to do it yet. Because I don't really like the idea of that arm flying down and hitting me in the head. What I thought I would do is just mount this up in the rafters. This is just a broom handle. I don't even know where it came from. It was in the shed when we moved here. So here we go. That should work. Great. Oh my goodness. I'm kind of not even believing this. Okay, immediately see the tool rest. Wow, this is weird. Well, there it is. I demonstrated I could actually do something more or less from rough to not quite final smoothness here. I'm still learning, obviously, I'm still learning a lot. If you can see what's going on over here, you can see that I've been making progress. And I'm gonna show you the progress I've actually made here in a second. I'd say all in all, I've got about 10 hours of turning practice. And it started with this. That's what you saw me turning on the video. This was terrible and it was really disheartening. And I was trying to turn it so that way the string here was rotating it towards me. And so I don't know why I thought that, but it made sense to me that the pole had to rotate the spindle towards you. In reality, what you want is a power stroke, so it's rotating towards you. See how it's coming my way when I push down? So you can power through it, and the tightness against this rotates it. It causes extreme friction to rotate this. So you really want it to rotate towards you. And so that means you put the string on your side here. Now, another thing I've been finding out is the positioning of the foot pedal really matters. And I've made a stationary one, as you'll see in a second here. But what you can do is the way you wind it can control which way the string will wander. If you don't want it to wander that way, you can put this on the outside and it'll stop it from wandering, depending. You can also move your lathe and make it pull it one way. So anyways, this was my first one turning the wrong way and with the tool rest really far away. Then what I did is I started clamping things onto the tool rest to see if it made a huge difference. From there, this is my second one. I turned a dowel with a tool when I clamped something onto the tool rest. So that's 2, and you can see it's getting much better quickly. Just by turning the right way and having a dowel and having a tool rest. All I was really using was this Aldi chisel, and I was skewing it like that, and a carving gouge. They worked fine. Not the best, but I was making them work. Then this was my number 3. This one was, I didn't start with the dowel, and I was just trying to get a consistent taper. Not very smooth finish, but it's clearly starting to show progress. 4, as you can see, again, starting from an octagon, I was able to do a bead and a little, whatever that is, a cove and a taper, trying to get that as even as possible all the way across. And now I'm really starting to figure things out. Here's number 5. It's really a little more crude. 6. Coming along okay. This is pine, tearing out really easily. My 7th ever turning was this leg. It was on Instagram. And this is actually not what it was. I've been practicing, trying to not get it to break out, to chip out on pine. But I turned it more or less to this dimension right here. And it has a lot of chip out and tear out and whatnot, and a lot of catching. But I was really proud that I had to actually, if you saw on Instagram, it was quite even. I got it much better than this. And like I said, I've just been practicing my not tearing out. And obviously it's not working so great. But this represented a huge step up for me. I felt like for the first time I could actually do the leg that I want to do. Then after that, I decided, well, maybe I should try walnut. I hear it's a much better turning material. So I did this, and I made this mallet. It had a huge crack down the middle, which kept tearing out. But this is not sanded. It's just straight off the tool and burnished with the wood shavings. And I'm pretty excited about that. I had sanded it, but then I took it down further. So there might still be some sanding, in all honesty. But this is basically straight off the tool. And like I said, I was just using this and a carving gouge. And then I went out and got myself some Harbor Freight chisels, the $20 ones. I could not get them to take an edge. It might have been me, but I tried on the skew chisel and I could not get it to take an edge. So I returned it and I got the $70 set. That's what I was just using now. These are the $70 ones. I had a 20% off coupon. And this one will take an edge, but it loses it quickly. If you sharpen it like every 5 minutes, you'd be okay. Maybe not on a regular lathe, but on this, with less RPMs, every 5 minutes or so, which is annoying, it's still working fine. I'm getting the hang of the skew chisel, the roughing gouge, and I also have a spindle gouge, and a bunch of other tools. I've got them color coordinating and stuff. But as you can see, this was just done, no sanding. It's just with the skew and the gouges. So I'm pretty stoked about this. A couple of upgrades I've done. First of all, I upgraded the pedal. The other one was fine, quite frankly, but it was squirrely. So maybe you could anchor it in 2 places, but I thought I'd just get a more stable one. This is a traditional design, a single pedal with triangle braces and then a bottom. It's the same original piece. I just cut off the sides and turned them into triangles. Another thing is that I anchored it to the floor here with this big piece that I had. I put some support brackets here and then screwed them into the lathe feet. That made a huge difference because a huge problem with this, because it's so light, is it walks on you and it's really difficult. So by standing on it, you're holding it in place. Would by right put one of these platforms as well, which is how I got the idea. Aside from the actual platform here, which stopped it from walking, another significant upgrade was this tool rest. You can see I cut off a good 2 inches or so from here and on the poppet and on the far end there. And that way I could get it really close, because if you can imagine, it was out all the way here and it wasn't working. Obviously, that was contributing massively to my failures, besides my being a newbie. So I upgraded this, and that immediately took things up a notch quickly. But then what I decided to do is I planed it down and added on a walnut strip, which has helped. But even so, it's still digging in a little bit when I can't get perfectly smooth back and forth. So we'll see. I'm gonna leave it for now, but this walnut lip has been really helpful. I mentioned in the video that I upgraded the screws. So this is actually just it's just a bolt, carriage bolt, excuse me, and that works great to tighten it down. The reason why I did that is because I felt like the other ones, because I had them sticking out a little bit so they wouldn't be up against the wood, they would kind of flex and it kept flying off. So I was just like, not gonna mess with it. I went full duty. I got the blackened ones because they look more like they're hand forged, even though of course they're mass produced. That was great. They're still within about a 1/16 of an inch of each other. They're slightly off like that. But whenever you lock it down, they're much closer in line. What I would say is this is the only money I've really spent on the lathe itself, which is like this $15 to get the bolts and the nuts and everything. Then of course I spent the $60 on the 20% coupon to get these tools, and I think that's worth it, but you don't need to if you have just a chisel and some sort of other kind of roughing gouge, like something you could use a roughing gouge. Like I said, I used this and it worked great. In fact, the steel's better than that. It holds its edge much longer. Another thing is, can you see I have my tool rest here? Just screwed it into there, placed it carefully. It's got room for 3 tools and a pencil. With one of my offcuts, I made a mallet. It's a dedicated mallet for the lathe. And let's see if you can spot it. I added a support. I felt like it was tipping back a little bit despite having the wedge. I don't know why, but I felt like it wasn't fully staying vertical. Like when I would tighten the wedge and then tighten this thing down on the side, it would push it back. I felt like that was contributing to it not being rigid enough. So I glued on a piece right here and then cut another mortise for a second wedge. So I have 2 wedges, and I always hammer this one in first and then this one in second. And now it's honestly, I feel like it's much more solid. Those are the major upgrades. So I moved the tool rest closer, I added a tool holder, and I added this second wedge system here. And now I feel like I've got it, and of course I've added the thicker bolts. I feel like right now I've got this sucker dialed in as about as good as I know how to get it dialed in as a complete amateur. I had the foot pedal centered, but now I moved it off to the side where I'm almost always am. That's a big issue with these, is that the string, so the string is attached at the top center, and depending on where you put the string, this goes up. And so maybe the string is here once and then over here, but so this stays constant and it stays constant at your foot, but it's moving, so it's always trying to pull itself one way. So I felt like if I put it to the closer to the right, the pedal, it'll stay there more. And that's where I tend to keep things, on this right side. We'll see. I can always just unscrew it and move the pedal. If you see my Instagram, you know that I switched out the mop handle for an actual branch. This is freshly cut. I found it in the neighborhood. Someone was cleaning out their yard. Now, the reason why I did this is because the mop handle just broke. And I tried other things, and this obviously is the best solution. Works great. As you can see, I've been having a blast with this thing. It's really, really fun. At first, the hardest part was, of course, just using the lathe, but then this whole thing is really difficult to master. But once you get it, it becomes quite natural. You get a rhythm. The one thing I would say about this that I've seen compared to other ones online, that like the really traditional ones, is that you have to really push this a lot more. So it increases your RPM. It increases like your RPMs because you have to push your leg so many more times. Whereas like a traditional one with a much longer pull that's outdoors, let's say, one foot push down might rotate this thing 5-6 times, whereas I counted it, I'm getting about 2 to 3 rotations per. And it's a very small distance it's traveling, maybe a foot. Whereas you might get 5 feet of travel, who knows, on a large branch, on a large sapling out in the yard. So that causes less work. So you kind of have to develop a stamina with this particular model. I will say though, that ending it, it's really been rewarding. I know I'm going to be able to turn the legs now. At first I was doubting, especially at that big disappointment. The other thing I'll say though is that unless you really need this model, unless you want to practice the joinery, I'm not sure I would recommend you building this model. You could just get like a 4x4 post, slap some 2x4s to the side of it, and brace it with some corner braces or like some 45-degree braces. And you can be up and running with some lag bolts and screws within like 3 or 4 hours, easily. Just like I said, 4x4 post, screwing stuff to it. If you want to do all the joinery, this is at the least, I don't know, this is like a 20 to 25 hour project, maybe 30 hours. I can tell you for sure, I've got 25 hours in this, especially with all the fidgeting, maybe more. And then another 10 hours of just learning to use it. So, I mean, a 40-hour project we're talking here, just to get up and running on a lathe. I don't know if you're looking to invest that. But anybody who's seen it so far, my wife actually hadn't even checked in on it, and then I asked her to come and look at it, and she was really impressed by the way it is. I video called my dad and my brother. They'd never seen one of these before. They're really impressed with it. It's just cool. So yeah, you know, you can disassemble it, but you can do that if you just screw it all together with, like I said, screws and bolts. So I guess what I would say then is I'm so glad I built this. For a moment, I was really thinking I'd wasted my time, but I'm gonna leave it up for now while I'm practicing. Then I'm gonna move it over to another edge of the shop. I'm gonna leave the branch up here, and you know, I'll just probably disassemble it and reassemble it as necessary, or maybe I'll not do that. Maybe I'll just leave it assembled. But as it is, it was a great project. If you're a beginner, if you want to practice your joinery, this is a great project. The cool thing is though, you don't have to be too accurate because it just has to be sturdy, and it's not too sturdy like that, but it is when you push forward on it like that, like this, it's rock solid. It's coming off the ground is all. So anyways, I just want to say thanks for watching. I know it was a really long video, and if you're out there and you're looking to build a pole lathe, particularly this pole lathe, Roy Underhill's SketchUp plans, this is for you. I put a lot of time in this because I wanted to make it for other people to be able to replicate this. I finally had success on this thing. I'm really stoked about it, and I'm proud of what I've done and how far I've come. And I hope that maybe I can make your life a little bit easier just by going through all this myself. Like I said, as a newbie, if you already know how to turn on a lathe, you're gonna be so much farther ahead than I am. So if you've liked this video, if you've gotten anything out of it, please consider subscribing, liking it, sharing it, and you know, help me in any way you can on my channel, so that way other people can find this type of content. So thanks once more. See you around for the next time.